Heroes of the City of Man.
Heroes of the City of Man.
Pages
Pages
305
305
to 323.
to 323.
Boom shakalaka.
Boom shakalaka.
Riddles of One and Many. Sophocles, Oedipus, Tyrannus. As much as any other work of Greek literature, Sophocles' tragedy Oedipus Tyrannus, or Oedipus the King, has influenced 20th century thought and culture. Sigmund Freud, founder of psychoanalysis, used the play in formulating his theory of the Oedipal complex, the suppressed desire of a child to kill his father in order to take his mother as a wife, which, according to Freud, wriggles its way into our fantasies and dreams and was even formative of the structures of ancient society. Maverick historian Immanuel Velikovsky argued in a fascinating book that the myth of Oedipus was based on the factual life of the Egyptian pharaoh Akhenaten. More recently, the lovely French films Jean de Florette and its sequel, Menon of the Springs, depict a reverse Oedipus story, one in which the father unwittingly kills his son in order to seize his land. The events that so intrigue modern writers and thinkers, however, have already taken place when the play opens. Like Homer in the Iliad, Sophocles begins Oedipus Tyrannus, which is the first of a trilogy that includes Antigone and Oedipus at Colonus, near the end of the story. The background of the play is this. When Oedipus is born to Laius and Jocasta, king and queen of Thebes, an oracle depicts that the child will grow up to murder his father and marry his mother. Frightened, Laius and Jocasta bind the boy's ankles and give him to a servant with orders to leave him to die on the mountain Cithaeron. Instead, the servant has compassion on the child and delivers Oedipus to a shepherd from the house of Polybus, king of Corinth, who in turn sends him to the childless Polybus. Raised as a prince of Corinth, Oedipus is as a young man, is told during a feast that he is not the son of Polybus. Though his parents vehemently deny it, Oedipus, showing early a characteristic relentlessness in seeking the truth, visits the oracle at Delphi, where he hears the same prophecy that frightened his true parents so long before. Fearing the oracle will come to pass if he returns to Corinth and still believing that Polybus is his father, Oedipus flees the city. Near the city of Thebes, Oedipus encounters a chariot carrying an old man at a place where three highways meet. Enraged when the chariot forces him from the road, Oedipus strikes the charioteer. The old man, who is, of course, Laius, hits Oedipus on the head with a goad, and Oedipus fights back, killing all but one of the party. Continuing toward Thebes, Oedipus meets the Sphinx, a monster with a woman's head and the body of a winged lion, who has been terrorizing the city. She asks a riddle of every traveler to and from Thebes, and if he cannot answer correctly, she kills and eats him. Oedipus solves the riddle, is proclaimed a hero and savior of Thebes, and marries a recently widowed queen, his mother, Jocasta. Sophocles' play is about Oedipus's and Jocasta's dawning realization that the oracle had come true after all. Painfully, we watch them put together the pieces and solve the riddle, and they are driven to desperation from the picture that results. Jocasta kills herself, and Oedipus puts out his eyes with her brooches and then demands to be exiled. Revelations come in reverse chronological order, as the following outline indicates. Prologue: Plague in Thebes, Oedipus and Creon. Scene 1, Tiresias tells Oedipus he is the murderer. Scene 2, Oedipus accuses Creon of conspiracy. Jocasta tells the place of the murder, and Oedipus concludes he is a murderer. Scene 3, Oedipus a messenger from Corinth. He learns he is not Polybus' son. Scene 4, Oedipus and shepherd. He learns he is Laius and Jocasta's son. Exodus. Jocasta kills herself. Oedipus blinds himself. Oedipus and Creon. Starting from his position as king of Thebes, Oedipus embarks on a time-reversing quest that returns him to the womb of his wife. As this outline shows, the turning point comes at the end of Scene 2 when Oedipus first suspects that he killed Laius. The reversal of fortune that he suffers is as dramatic as his unexpected rise to the throne of Thebes. As Bernard Knox puts it, Oedipus falls from tyrant to beggar, from best to worst of men, from honor to uncleanness, from sight to blindness. No one in the play knows what has happened in the past, but readers and viewers do know, and this gives nearly every line of the play a significance that eludes the characters. At the beginning, Thebes is suffering from a plague. When Oedipus learns that the plague has come because Laius's killer is still at large, he promises to discover the killer's identity. And just so you will see me as an ally, a champion of my country and the god, for when I drive pollution from the land, I will not serve a distant friend's advantage, but act in my own interest. Whoever he was that killed the king may readily wish to dispatch me with his murderous hand. So helping the dead king, I help myself. Oedipus sees that investigating the death of the late king is in his own interest, but has not the slightest suspicion that the vengeance he swears might fall on his own head. That is, that he is the filth that must be driven out. Oedipus's fear that the man who killed Laius may do him harm is fully justified, for the same hand that killed the former king will in the end be raised against Oedipus. Later, Oedipus insists that he will fulfill the duty of avenging Laius's death, since the late king had no chance to beget sons of his own. Since I am now the holder of his office, and have his bed and wife that once was his, and had his line not been unfortunate, we would have common children. Fortune leaped upon his head. Because of all these things, I fight in his defense as for my father, and I shall try all means to take the murderer. In addition to the more obvious unintended meanings here, there is that subtle little comment about fortune or luck. Oedipus will later say that he is a son of luck. Unknown to Oedipus, Laius did have luck in fatherhood, though it turned out to be bad luck that leaped upon his head. Concentrating on the end of the story enables Sophocles to play with the double significance of what is said and done. But Sophocles' decision has some drawbacks, strewing the drama with tremendous improbabilities. When the play opens, Oedipus has long ago killed his father and married his mother, but during the course of the investigation, that takes up most of the play. Oedipus apparently learns for the first time how Laius died and begins to realize that he was present at the murder scene on the very same day. Before he begins probing, Oedipus does not even seem to know whether Laius was killed in the country or the city. Why didn't he investigate long before? Would not a man with the forcefulness and intelligence of Oedipus have looked into Laius's death immediately upon taking the throne? Moreover, one man survived from Laius's party, but instead of saying something, when the Oedipus showed up at Thebes as a hero, he left the city and became a herdsman. Why did he not inform someone that the new king was a regicide? Characters comment finally on the strong resemblance that Oedipus bears to his father, and we wonder why Jocasta never noticed this before. Despite these flaws, the play continues to move audiences and fascinate scholars, and the reasons are not difficult to find. Oedipus Tyrannus is about a spectacularly dysfunctional family, far worse even than the Danish royal house in Hamlet. In the 20th century, marriage vows are taken so lightly and divorce and remarriage so common that the relations of parents and children in a home can be very confusing. I once met a family with 3 children, none of whom had the same 2 parents. One child was the mother's from a previous marriage, another the father's from a previous marriage, and the third child had been born during the second marriage. Oedipus makes such a family look mainstream. He is husband and son to his wife, brother and father to his children. He could have a whole week to himself on Jerry Springer. As with most Greek drama, Oedipus Tyrannus also operates at a political level. Some scholars have gone so far as to suggest that the play is essentially a story about Athens, with Oedipus representing that Greek city, while others have tried to match the play's characters to political figures of Sophocles' day, much as Primary Colors is thinly disguised tittle-tattle about Bill and Hillary Clinton. Though most doubt that Oedipus is so directly a political commentary, there is undoubtedly a political message that would have been understood by the original audiences. The political angle is evident in the title, for Sophocles calls Oedipus a tyrannus. This word does not necessarily have the same negative connotation as our tyrant in tragedy. It is sometimes interchangeable with king. Hence, a Latin translation of Sophocles' title is Oedipus Rex. But the Greek word could mean tyrant in a sinister sense, and even when it refers to a benevolent ruler, it refers to a ruler with absolute power. Through the play, we will be forced to ask in what sense Oedipus is tyrannous. Related to this political theme is a cultural opposition between city and wilderness, savagery and civilization. This contrast is built into the Oedipus myth, since Oedipus' parents put him in a wilderness to die. Without city or home, this child of the wasteland becomes husband, father, and king. Yet he remains a man of the wilderness in many ways, as his crimes indicate. To the Greeks, as we shall see more fully below, prohibition of parricide, killing one's father, and incest were basic human laws. Unlike animals which kill and mate indiscriminately, human beings view natural blood relations as morally significant. A man who attacks his father and beds his mother has moved morally from the city into the wild. He is no longer a man but a beast. With this attention to the contrast of savage and civilized, Sophocles is wrestling with the worldview inherited from the heroic epics of Homer. Like the hero, Oedipus is like a force of nature towering above all other citizens, reaching toward the amoral height of the gods. He has an overpowering personality, is quick and aggressive, rages like an Achilles against obstacles, and has a nose for the slightest whiff of conspiracy or competition for his honors. Large portions of the play are like scenes from L.A. Law, as Oedipus rather brutally interrogates witness after witness until he finds the truth. This play, like other Greek tragedies, examines what happens when such a hero takes up residence in a house or city. Can we expect Achilles to put on an apron to wash the dishes, or Odysseus to concern himself with the details of administering a city? Can a hero survive in a city? Can a city survive a hero? In ancient thought, religious and political concerns were not separated, and the contrast of city and wilderness are related to religious rituals and beliefs. On one level, the play is a dramatic rendering of the Greek religious rite of the Pharmakos. In this rite, which is very close to the Hebrew rite in which a scapegoat was sent into the desert on the Day of Atonement, Leviticus 16, the impurities of the city were cleansed by driving a victim outside the walls. In the play, Oedipus is a scapegoat, the source of impurity. Accordingly, Oedipus urges Creon to exile him from the city when it is shown that he is unclean. The one who violates the principles of the city, who descends to the level of the beast, must be thrust back into the wild. In this way, the city can be purged, healed, and raised to new life. Oedipus' return to the wild is highly paradoxical, for though left to die on a mountain as a child, he has come to embody the highest attainments of civilization. Vigorous, intelligent, benevolent, Oedipus has ruled Thebes with skill. As Knox points out, the imagery of the play associates him with the cultural and scientific achievements of ancient Athens. Sherlock Holmes in a tunic, he interprets clues and doggedly hunts for the truth. Without training as a prophet, he unravels the riddle of the Sphinx. He is compared to a captain who can guide Thebes through her storms, to a plowman who has caused the city to blossom like a rose, and to a physician who can heal the plague. Each set of imagery, however, is reversed during the course of the play. The hunter turns out to be the hunted, and Holmes accuses himself, the man who solved the riddle of the Sphinx, is baffled by the riddle of himself. The captain is stricken and loses control of the ship. The plowman plows where he should not and causes sterility. The physician is sick and infects everyone. Oedipus' fall is not meaningless, but has a crucial theological dimension, an embodiment of the Greek view that man is a measure of all things. Oedipus learns through bitter suffering that, on the contrary, man is measured by the gods. Oedipus is initially hailed as one who knows the gods intimately, but his quest progresses. He realizes that he knows nothing of their ways. The chorus leader concludes that Oedipus has been the victim of savage and cruel demons who leaped on your life to your ill luck, a leap beyond man's strength. Agonized, he asked, "What has God done to me?" Fitz and Fitzgerald translation, but has little hope of an answer. The struggle between Oedipus and the gods centers on the reliability of prophecy, and there is a conversation among Oedipus, Jocasta, and the chorus concerning this issue throughout the play. If the gods truly rule, they must be able accurately to tell the future. If they cannot, then, as Jocasta eventually says, chance rules all, and one should live randomly. Oedipus realizes, too late, that there is no escape from the gods, and he becomes a proof that the gods rule, and that oracles once pronounced will come to pass. Interwoven with the question of the relation to the gods to Oedipus is the issue of responsibility and guilt. In his Poetics, Aristotle used Oedipus Tyrannus to illustrate his theory of tragedy. According to Aristotle, a tragedy tells of a great and noble character who falls because of some tragic fault, some hamartia, which is one of the Greek words translated as sin in the New Testament. Taking hamartia to mean sin, many have searched the play for evidence of Oedipus's wrongs, pointing to his overbearing treatment of Creon and Tiresias, and to his excessive self-confidence as evidence of the fault of hubris, a word often translated as pride, that refers to the effort to exceed human limits. Yet these events happen after the plague has already begun, so the plague can hardly be punishment for sins that have not been committed yet. Clearly, Oedipus's hamartia is his parricide and incense, but since he was ignorant of his actions, we are left wondering at the severity of his punishment. The question of Oedipus' responsibility can be answered so long as we realize, as E.R. Dodds points out, that hamartia in Aristotle does not mean sin in the Christian sense, but a mistake, a false judgment, an error. In this sense, Oedipus commits a hamartia when he ignorantly kills his father and marries his mother. In tragedy, according to Aristotle, the consequences of hamartia arouse us to pity and fear. We pity Oedipus because we feel that it is not his fault. We fear not because Sophocles warns that we will be judged by a just God, but because the play reveals the unpredictable nature of fortune and the savagery of the gods. The play suggests the frightening prospect that the world is a kind of world where such horrible things happen to good and decent people, like Oedipus, and that the gods are the kind of gods that spring traps like the one they laid for Oedipus. Oedipus' pursuit of the truth may also be seen as an act of hubris, reinforcing the theme of the limits of human knowledge and achievement. Pursuing truth is one of the glories of man, yet once uncovered, truth brings catastrophe. Oedipus does not fall because of his weakness, but because of his strengths. Imagery of blindness and sight, light and darkness, and hiding and unveiling reinforces this theme. To see this issue fully, we need to recall that Oedipus became king of Thebes when he successfully solved the riddle of the Sphinx. Oedipus is a hero of the mind who finds a way to untie the knot of any riddle. Tiresias mentions this in his encounter with Oedipus early in the play and gives him a further riddle to solve. The whole play is about Oedipus trying to solve a double mystery. Who killed Laius, and where did I come from? Confident of his own intellect, he pushes aside everyone who tries to conceal the truth or divert his attention. In the end, tragedy arises because both questions point to his guilt. When he has sketched the criminal's face, he finds he is looking in a mirror. In this case, truth does not set free. Truth leads to despair. Oedipus' incense also plays a symbolic role in this regard. Incest is, as we will see below, an assault on a fundamental structure of the life of the city. When the sexual wall between mother and son is crossed or broken, the city dissolves and dies. There are hints that the pursuit of knowledge itself is considered a kind of incense, a breaching of limits and boundaries. Though never explicitly mentioned in the play, the riddle of the Sphinx is important background. She asks, what creature is it who, though speaking with one voice, walks sometimes on 4 legs, sometimes on 2, and sometimes on 3, and is weakest when it has the most legs? Oedipus correctly discerns that the answer is man, who crawls as a baby, rises to an upright position, but must lean on a staff in old age. To the Greeks, this was more than a not very clever joke, but represented the position of man in the universe. Humans differ from gods because men are changeable. Gods do not grow through various stages. They are born, as it were, walking upright. At the same time, the riddle distinguishes human beings in 2 ways from the beasts. Infants who crawl on all 4s are similar to animals who go on 4 legs, but for the human infant, this is only one stage of development. Man evolves beyond the beasts. Elderly humans, moreover, are known by that strange third leg. Unlike animals, man is capable of compensating for the weakness of age through technology and invention. Thus, the riddle places man in Middle Earth between the gods above and the beasts below. The riddle has a specific ironic meaning for Oedipus himself. When Oedipus was an infant, Laius and Jocasta put pins in his ankles to keep him from crawling to safety when they exposed him on the mountain. Thus he never went on all fours. As a result of this childhood maiming, Oedipus is lame. He never fully stands on two legs, a fact evident in his name, Oedipus, swollen foot, for which there are many puns in the play. At the end, he uses a cane because of his blindness. Oedipus himself is the man that answers the Sphinx riddle. Yet when he has solved that riddle, he has solved almost nothing. Riddles still abound, riddles concerning the gods, riddles concerning himself. City in Confusion, Prologue and Scene 1. When the play begins, Thebes is suffering from a plague. As the priest tells Epidas, our city is reeling like a wreck already. It can scarcely lift its prow out of the depths, out of the blood surf. With Thebes tossed by storms, the people appeal to Oedipus, reliable helmsman of the ship of state. Thebes has also become barren. Because of the plague, a blight is on the fruitful plants of the earth. A blight is on the cattle in the fields. A blight is on our women that no children are born to them. Wilderness has invaded the fruitful city, which has become a wasteland, full of decay and death. The corporate dimension of the crisis is important throughout the play. Oedipus is a journey of self-discovery, but it is played out against the background of the threat, as a priest tells Oedipus that the state will be engulfed in the storm. Imagery of fruitlessness is significant for the failure of the Thebans plowing and sowing owes to the illicit sexual plowing and sowing of their king. Oedipus warrants the trust they put in him. The priest reminds him that once before he was a savior of the city when he loosed the knot of the Sphinx riddle. Oedipus is clearly a compassionate, good king. He considers his subjects children, identifies with their anguish, and promises them all the help that they need. He's also a man of dominating action, swift and decisive. The priest suggests that he consult the gods to help the city. But Oedipus has already done so. The fact that Oedipus consults the gods before taking action to deliver the city suggests he is a pious ruler as well. So it seems. Yet the early action of the play suggests a certain confusion among the cities and with Oedipus. The first set of choral songs are prayers for healing and salvation. What is the sweet spoken word of God from the shrine of Pytho, rich in gold, that has come to glorious Thebes? I am stretched out on the rack of doubt and terror and trembling hold. My heart, O Delian healer, I worship full of fears for what doom you will bring to pass, new or renewed in the revolving years. Yet the priest calls Oedipus greatest in all men's eyes and appeals to him for a remedy. Though the priest admits that Oedipus is not one of the gods, he leads the people to the altar because he is the first of men in all the chances of this life, and when we mortals have to do with more than man. It is difficult to tell whether the people of Thebes are praying to Apollo or to Oedipus, since, as the priest tells Oedipus, they sit as supplicants around your altar. As king, Oedipus is expected to be not only ruler, but savior. Oedipus, especially in his blistering exchange with Tiresias, reveals a troubling strain of impiety. When Tiresias refuses to help, Oedipus responds with a series of nearly blasphemous attacks on the prophet and prophecy. Tiresias is a juggling, trick-devising quack who has eyes for his own gain but blindness in his skill. Prophecy itself, relying on entrails and the flights of birds, was no help when the Sphinx threatened Thebes, and it is no help now. I solved the riddle by my wit alone. Mine was no knowledge got from birds. Human ingenuity, not divine prophecy, is a measure of knowledge. Oedipus's piety is like that of nominal Episcopalians whose faith the philosopher Alistair MacIntyre summarized as, "There is no God, and it is prudent to pray to him from time to time." The chorus of citizens is far more conservative. Caught between their love for their king and the honor due to prophets of Apollo, they conclude that perhaps Tiresias got it wrong. Truly Zeus and Apollo are wise, and in human things all-knowing, but amongst men there is no distinct judgment between the prophet and me. Which of us is right? One man may pass another in wisdom, but I would never agree with those that find fault with the king till I should see the word proved beyond doubt. More insightful at this point than their king, the chorus sees that if prophecy fails, so do the gods. They are not prepared to accept that. For those who know the story, the opening dialogue between the priest and Oedipus is full of unintended ironies. In the priest's opinion, Oedipus is the wisest in the ways of God, but events will reveal an Oedipus who has completely failed to understand the gods. When Oedipus says that I know that you are all sick, yet there is not one of you, sick though you are, that is as sick as I myself, his expression of sympathy is much truer than he knows. The word loose, used here to describe how Oedipus solved the Sphinx riddle, is found many times in the play. His feet were bound and loosed as an infant. He has loosed Thebes once before, and the people look to him to loose them from the plague. But he is not capable of loosing the knot of the new riddle, the riddle of himself. The one trusted to keep the wilderness at bay is himself a product of the wilderness. The citizens turn to a healer who has caused the plague. Choral strophes in Scene 1 also include unnoticed clues to the identity of the murderer. The chorus warns the criminal that now is a time for him to run with a stronger foot than Pegasus, and speculates that the unknown murderer is lurking in the savage forests and in the caverns like the mountain bull. He is sad and lonely his feet that carry him far from the navel of the earth. In both sentences, the chorus use the words foot, paus, and Greek, but they do not recognize a murderer standing before them on his own swollen feet. Just as Oedipus tells the priest that Creon has been sent to consult the oracle at Delphi, Creon appears. Apollo's oracle, in plain words, commanded us to drive out a pollution from our land, pollution grown ingrained within the land, a defilement that has been feeding on the strength of the city. We tend to think of crime and punishment in terms of deterrence. When people see that crime is punished, they are afraid to commit the same crimes themselves. If we do not punish criminals, then more people will commit crimes. In the ancient world, crimes were often thought of in terms of dirt and cleansing, of defilement and purging. In the book of Leviticus, for example, various kinds of uncleanness are listed: skin disease, touching a dead body, certain kinds of emissions from the body, and these make a person unfit to enter the court of the Lord's house for worship. For an unclean person, drawing near to a holy place is dangerous, and Leviticus 12-15 prescribes certain cleansing rites that will make it safe for a worshiper to come near. Similar conceptions are at work in Sophocles, now applied within a city. Thebes suffers from plague because of impurity, and if she is to revive, the impurity has to be removed. Murder in itself would defile the city, but this is a particularly serious defilement because the victim is a former king, Laius. For many ancient peoples, a king was a sacred figure, and attacking him was an act of sacrilege that generated dangerous impurities. The exchange between Creon and Oedipus that follows is significant on several levels. Like so much else, this passage is filled with double meanings, as both characters speak falsehoods they believe to be true and make statements that say far more than they realize. Oedipus claims that I have not seen King Laius. In reality, he is simply blind to what he saw, since he was the last to see the king alive. Oedipus immediately begins interrogating Creon about the crime and asks whether any witnesses remain, without knowing that he is the chief witness. Then there is a strange inability of Creon and Oedipus to agree on the number of Laius's attackers. Creon tells Oedipus that the robbers they encountered were many, and the hands that did the murder were many. It was no man's single power. Not just one man, but a great company, is a translation offered by J.T. Shepard. In the next line, however, Oedipus is wondering how a robber could be so daring. Several things may be going on here. First, Creon's insistence that there was a company of highwaymen delays Oedipus's recognition of his crime, and thus heightens the dramatic tension. Second, perhaps Oedipus has already begun, unconsciously, to realize that he did see Laius, and so he corrects Creon's mistaken account. Finally, and more subtly, this conversation opens a theme of the one and many that is important throughout the play. Creon speaks of many attackers. Oedipus speaks of one. For the audience who knows the story, the many is the one. Though one, Oedipus is also many, combining many roles. Father and brother to his children, son and husband to Jocasta, he is a whole family in one person. According to the riddle of the Sphinx, man, unlike the gods, is always both one and many. He begins in a bestial stage on 4 legs, stands on 2 legs, and then relies on tools to help in old age. Similarly, every man may be both son and husband, both father and brother. In this sense, Oedipus is every man. Of course, the way the one and many combine in Oedipus is unique, and here we return to the issue of defilement. Impurity in ancient cultures often results from crossing moral or ritual boundaries. Sometimes these boundaries are literal. An unauthorized person who crosses a threshold into a temple defiles a temple. Sometimes the boundaries are moral and social. Saying, "Thou shalt not," is like drawing a line or building a fence, and a person who crosses that line to do what is forbidden causes impurity. Both of Oedipus's crimes cross a moral boundary essential to a flourishing city. Oedipus' initial crime is not only murder, not only the murder of a king, but the murder of his father. Paternal authority was to the Greeks, as in the Bible, one of the fundamental structures of civilized society. If sons do not honor their fathers, they will not receive the wisdom and skill that the fathers have accumulated. Whatever foundations a father's laid, the sons will pull them up or ignore them and lay their own foundation. At this rate, no building can ever be completed, for each generation must begin afresh, making up the world as it goes. A civilization without honor to fathers is doomed to stagnate and stall. It will build nothing more than foundations. For a son to assault his father is like pulling down a load-bearing pillar in a house. It brings the whole building crashing down. Oedipus' further crime was incest, and this too is an assault on a basic principle of the city's order. An organized society exists only if the various roles we play in the theater of life are protected by rules. If every man can act as a husband to every woman, then family life dissolves into chaos. No one could tell which men belong with which women, or who has responsibility for which children. Like an attack on the father, therefore, incest is a source of sterility and stagnation. A man who marries his daughter or a woman who marries her son inhibits the leaving and cleaving that is necessary to the creation of a new home. If each father is also a brother to his sons, if each woman is sister to her daughters, then the younger generation has not really moved beyond the older generation, and no progress is possible. Oedipus, ignorant though he may have been, crosses a barrier between a mother and son and confuses the roles of son and husband. Fittingly, the whole city is dissolving and sterile as a result of the plague that these actions have brought on. The scene between Creon and Oedipus also begins to highlight their differences of temperament. Oedipus is precisely the kind of king you want if your city is being threatened by a sphinx or a plague. Aggressive, probing, impatient, he wants to get to the truth, and now. But his quickness also leads him to jump to rash conclusions. When Creon tells him about Laius' death, he muses, "How could a robber dare a deed like this were he not helped with money from the city, money and treachery?" Shepherd again gives a more literal translation. "What brought the robber? What, unless 'twas pay, something contrived from Thebes to such a deed?" In this translation, Oedipus interrupts his own question by pondering the possibility that someone might have planned and paid to have Laius killed. Creon says that this possibility was raised at the time, but the threat from the Sphinx prevented him from pursuing it. For the quick-thinking Oedipus, this begins to smell like a cover-up. He asks a crucial political question: who benefits and suspects Creon? Oedipus goes even further in his suspicions of Creon after his sharp encounter with Tiresias. He now suspects that Creon is the murderer of that man and has attempted highway robbery of my crown. Again, he has only the slenderest of evidence that this is true, yet he makes the accusation insistently. Creon's reaction is remarkable. "Do you know what you're doing? Will you listen to the words to answer yours and then pass judgment?" He has just been accused of plotting murder and revolution, but he remains calm and moderate, patiently offering a defense against an outrageous slander. His essential character and his difference from Oedipus is summarized in a statement he makes twice in the course of the play. "When I know nothing, I usually hold my tongue." Cautious to a fault, Creon is also without ambition. When Oedipus accuses him of seeking the throne, he says he prefers restful sleep to the cares and anxieties of office, as he thinks any sane man would. If so, then his king is insane, for he relishes the responsibility of rule. In all these respects, Creon is a foil to Oedipus, a character who shows up Oedipus' strengths and weaknesses by way of contrast. Tiresias, the blind seer, is not so calm as Creon. His encounter with Oedipus begins cordially. Oedipus addresses him as one versed in everything, things teachable and things not to be spoken, things of the heaven and earth, creeping things. High praise from a king whom the priests described as the wisest mortal in the ways of the gods. Though physically blind, Tiresias sees things that no one else does. Indeed, he sees more than he wishes to tell and refuses at first to answer Oedipus's questions about the source of the city's plague. There is no need to reveal wisdom when it brings no profit to the man that's wise. For Oedipus, discovery of the truth is essential to the health of the city, and he considers Tiresias's resistance as the act of a traitor. Would you betray us and destroy the city? Paradoxically, it is unveiling the truth that will bring far more serious ruin. Mention of betrayal takes Oedipus back to his half-formed thoughts in his conversation with Creon, and he again rashly concludes that there is a conspiracy. I would have you know I think you are a complotter of the deed and doer of the deed, save in so far as for the actual killing. When Tiresias directly tells him, you are the land's pollution, Oedipus concludes that Tiresias is being paid by Creon to accuse him. Creon, friend from the first and loyal, thus secretly attacks me, secretly desires to drive me out. The closing exchanges between the king and the prophet play on imagery of blindness and sight. When Oedipus says Tiresias has eyes only for money, Tiresias takes up the challenge to his prophetic insight. Since you have taunted me for being blind, here's my word for you. You have eyes, but see not where you are, in sin, nor where you live, nor whom you live with. Do you know who your parents are? Unknowing you are an enemy to kith and kin, in death, beneath the earth, and in this life. A deadly-footed, double-striking curse from father and mother both shall drive you forth out of this land, with darkness on your eyes, that now have such straight vision. A deadly-footed curse will light upon King Swollen Foot, and blindness lies in store for the man who prides himself for his insight. Tiresias closes the scene by predicting that the murderer of Laius will be found. Known as a stranger, the murderer will be revealed as a Theban, and then having received blindness for sight and beggary for riches, his exchange, he shall go journeying to a foreign country, tapping his way before him with a stick. On stage there is a man without sight, but it is not the blind man. Perhaps one must become blind before he can begin to see. Oedipus's blind spot has nothing to do with parenthood, and thus with his own identity. For the Greeks, more than for us, who am I was very closely linked to who are my parents. Oedipus is struck by the seer's continual references to his parents, but Tiresias says only, this day will give you a father and break your heart. Oedipus rages against his infantile riddles, but Tiresias reminds him that you were a great man once at solving riddles, and adds that solving the Sphinx riddle brought about your ruin. What Oedipus and all Thebans see as an act of salvation, Tiresias sees as a beginning of disaster. Unraveling this new riddle, the one concerning his parenthood and identity, will complete Oedipus's destruction.